Nearer far, all this world, is that dear isle to me. It is not that alone it stands, where all around is fresh and fair, but because it is my native land, and my home is there. But because it is my native land, and my home is there. Farewell, though lands may meet, they meet my gaze where'er I roam. I shall not find a spot so fair, as that dear isle to me. It is not that alone it stands, where all around is fresh and fair, but because it is my native land, and my home is there. But because it is my native land, and my home is there.
Special guests, ladies and gentlemen, it is my pleasure to welcome you here this afternoon to celebrate the launch of County Cavan's Roll of Honour and to the official launch of Phase 2 of the Peace Tree programme. Today, the 96th anniversary of the first day of the Somme, which was one of the bloodiest days in the history of the Great War, was chosen as an appropriate day to launch the Roll of Honour. On this day in 1916, 20,000 men were killed in action, with another 40,000 injured. Young men like James Anderson from Bailieborough and Robert Clark, who was only 20 years of age, from Red Hills, are just two local Cavan names behind the sad statistics of this day. It is these young men and 650 others from County Cavan that Cavan Peace Partnership are honouring today. In November 2010 and June 2011, members of the Cavan Peace Partnership, with the support of the Peace Tree programme, under the auspices of the EU Special Programmes Body, travelled to the most notorious battlefields in Belgium and France. And in the presence of the Belgian ambassador, Mr. Robert de Vries, we wish to acknowledge the work of the Belgian government in preserving these sites. Although we prepared for our trip by reading up on the various battles under the guidance of the International School for Peace, and I wish to acknowledge the presence of Mr. Glenn Barr here today, I can honestly say that nothing can prepare you for the effect that visiting these sites can have on you. When you stand in the field where tens of thousands of people were slaughtered and you see the conditions they fought under, it definitely has a profound effect on you. The first group who visited the battlefields in November 2010 decided that the rest of the partnership would have to visit the battlefield, and were also determined that a roll of honour for the county had to be produced. My colleague Paddy Constant took on the leadership role with Siobhan Wallace, and then recruited Angie Sutherland to research the whole project. When you see the final outcome of the project, this book, which will be distributed later in the library, you will see what a wonderful comprehensive publication they have produced. I just noticed that I left out two people in my opening introductions, and that was Mr. Peter Sengraf representing the German embassy and Mr. Alan McCarthy representing New Zealand embassy. And you're both very welcome as well. Sorry about that. Now I would like to introduce a number of speakers. The format of today, we will have a number of speeches here, then we will proceed to the memorial which is erected in honour of the date of World War I, and lace wreaths and crosses there, and then return to the library for refreshments. The first speaker of today's event is Mr. David O'Murrough, CBE, Major General retired, President of the Royal British Legion in the Republic of Ireland. Mr. O'Murrough.
Ladies and gentlemen, as the President of the British Legion in the Republic of Ireland, and I've been there for over 20 years now, I'm really privileged to have been asked to introduce this volume, recording the war dead of World War I from Cavan County. I've nothing but compliments to those involved in doing this research and in putting into a form that all Cavan men and women can have access to. It is widely known that those who went to that war and were fortunate enough to return did so to a very different Ireland to the one they left. The changed political scene was not favourable, even hostile, to those who had taken part in the war, and there was little, if any, enthusiasm to remember officially the 49,400 from the whole of this island who paid the ultimate sacrifice. However, their names are recorded in the Ireland's War Memorial records that are kept in the Irish War Memorial Gardens at Island Bridge. The political attitude prevailing in this country deterred the erection of local memorials, and even families of those concerned were fearful of acknowledging World War I service of family members. Undoubtedly, the troubles of the 1970s and 80s placed the remembrance of war dead even more firmly under the carpet. However, the ceasefire in the north and the consequent Good Friday Agreement, Belfast Agreement in 1998, the political attitude changed, climate changed, and through a conscious process of reconciliation, remembrance of the dead of World War I began to emerge. President Mary McAleese played a leading role by attending the annual remembrance service in St. Patrick's Cathedral, as had her predecessor, Mary Robinson. During the period since 1998, a number of memorials have been unveiled by the President at Messines in Belgium and at Gallipoli. She also unveiled memorials at Tipperary, Castlebar and Killarney, all resulting from local initiatives. Other local memorials have also been erected or refurbished in memory of local people. As important, books of honour, such as this one, have been published, to my knowledge, by counties Tipperary, Mayo, Louth, Donegal, Monaghan, Wicklow, Wexford, Waterford, Cork, Galway and Dublin, and there may be others. It's a sobering thought that over 650 names are in this book. I believe and hope that its publication will honour the names of those in it, and that it will give lasting dignity to the living relatives of all included. Thank you.
Thank you very much. It's a privilege to be here on An extraordinarily appropriate day, the day on which, the 96th anniversary of the day on which 2,000 Ulstermen died on the first day of the Somme. I'd like to begin, also I thought it was interesting, the choice of Danny Boy as one of the songs. I'm not sure how many of you are aware of the fact that the lyrics, obviously the air is the Derry air, it's an old traditional Irish air, but those lyrics, which we all cherish, were actually written by a Londoner, a man called Frederick Weatherly, and the Danny Boy in question was his son, whom he lost in World War I, so a very appropriate choice of music, and congratulations to the Rugby Club for choosing that one. I want to begin by reading something I wrote 18 years ago for a book entitled Irish Voices from the Great War. It was in a postscript to a chapter on the Battle of the Somme. It made a passing reference to a granduncle of mine, Pat O'Reilly from Bailieborough, John Patrick O'Reilly from Bailieborough, who'd been killed in September 1916 and whose name is entered in Roll of Honour, Cavan's World War I dead. And what I wrote at the time was, when you go to visit those dead today, in the neat, well-kept Commonwealth War Graves Commission cemeteries, which leap out of the landscape in all sorts of places, at the side of roads, in the middle of cornfields, you can see who else has been there before you by looking in the visitors' books for their signatures. Few come and go without leaving at least their names. If you visit, for example, the Lonsdale Cemetery near Adelaide, not far from places with more evocative names like Thiepval, Guillemont or Genshi, where 19927 Rifleman J.P. O'Reilly of the 2nd Battalion Royal Irish Rifles, a granduncle of the author, lies buried, you'll see the thick black leather visitor's book. Should you go there after the 1st of July of any year, you'll notice the names of many visitors from the north of Ireland. But despite the fact that many of the men who lie in that cemetery do not come from Northern Ireland, but from the Republic of Ireland, you'll search the book in vain for southern names and addresses. Understandably, perhaps 1916 has altogether different resonances for the people of Northern Ireland than for those of the Republic. Tom Kettle has been borne out in his resigned acceptance that the deaths of a relatively small number of committed and determined men in Dublin at Easter would ultimately, for nationalist Ireland, count for more than the deaths of thousands of Irishmen in the Great War. Now, I think so much has changed in the 2 decades since I felt compelled to make those observations after a visit to a beautifully kept garden of stone in Picardy. In the last 4 years, obviously, we may have given back a bit of the progress, but this country did a lot of growing up between 1994, coincidentally the year of the first IRA ceasefire, and today. Part of the maturing process and the growth in confidence in the Republic of Ireland has been reflected in our capacity to acknowledge that more than a few Southern Unionist renegades fought in the British Army in the Great War, and that their involvement was greeted not so much with amnesia, with a great forgetting, but with aphasia, a great sustained and embarrassed silence, an inability to discuss or acknowledge certain inescapable facts, not, let's face it, an unfamiliar characteristic of we, the Irish. What we've done in recent years with the help of people like Kevin Myers, Paddy Hart, Glenn Barr, and I'm delighted to hear that Glenn Barr is here today, Tom Burke of the Dublin Fusiliers Association, and indeed fellow broadcasters like Gay Byrne and Joe Duffy, is to do something equally Irish, I think, to finally give them their due. It's like that great Irish phrase, in fairness, has become incarnate. Because to have gone on ignoring this element of our heritage would be to have denied the complexity of the Irish nationalist narrative, to have failed to come to terms with our totality as a nation. It's a bit like being a talented footballer who doesn't want to admit that he's also a keen classical violinist, because it might appear to be somewhat unmanly. There were many reasons why Irishmen who were, by the way, never subjected to conscription, despite the threat of same in 1918, many reasons why they enlisted in a number of armies, mostly in the British Army, and fought in the Great War. Some went to defend the Union. Some went to defend Home Rule. Some went to acquire the skills necessary to wreak havoc on the Union, which they subsequently used from 1919 to 1921, or to wreak havoc on Home Rule. Some went because they were so impoverished they were prepared to trade their bodies to provide food for their families. Some went because their fathers and their grandfathers had fought in previous wars. Some went because it was a great adventure and half the village seemed to want to get involved before it was all over. Some went to defend their co-religionists in Europe. Some went to defend the continent of Europe from imperialist tyranny. Some went to defend the aristocratic privileges of their class. Nearly 40,000 never came back. Many, many more came back broken in body and in spirit. The granduncle to whom I referred in that extract was one of the 9 children of Bernard O'Reilly and Mary or May Clark of the Square in Ballybor, a town at which I note from the Roll of Honour offered up 50 dead to the Great War, almost twice the number of nearby Virginia. I'm not sure whether to be proud or saddened by that statistic. Anyway, Pat's brother was my maternal grandfather, Dr. Terry O'Reilly, Cavan County medical officer in the 1930s, who lived just out the road here for many years. Family lore has it that Pat was inspired to join the British Armed Forces early on in the war by a local priest who called from the pulpit on able-bodied young Irishmen to rush to the defence of little Catholic Belgium. Now, Pat was just 18 years old at the time. He enlisted without informing anyone, and although my great-grandfather attempted to have the enlistment rescinded, the die was cast, and he went to, not as it transpired, the Western Front, but initially to Gallipoli. There's a certain irony in the fact, and this is part of the complexity of Irish history, irony in the fact that someone who joined up on the basis of pan-European Roman Catholic solidarity should then have ended up in the 2nd Battalion of the Royal Irish Rifles. And this was a regular army unit consisting largely of working-class Protestants from Antrim and down, although it wasn't part of the famous loyalist 36th Ulster Division, which was a volunteer unit. In other words, he would have ended up in a regiment that would have been more likely to march under that banner than under that banner, let's put it like that. And prior to ending up in the 2nd Royal Irish Rifles, Pat had served in the 6th Royal Irish Rifles, in the 10th Irish Division, which found itself at Gallipoli and later in Salonika. And there are 3 surviving letters that I'm aware of, which I have, from Pat. 2 were to his mother, or would have been my great-grandmother, and 1 to my grandfather, his brother. Somehow Pat managed to get himself attached to the 8th Battalion of the Australian Expeditionary Force in Gallipoli, so he ended up for a while as an Anzac. The letter he sent to my grandfather on the 31st of August 1915 refers to Cavan, quote, going great guns in the football, and to intermittent shelling from the Turks, which he said does little damage, except, or I'm losing my place here, does little damage except to knock down a few sandbags. 6 weeks later, he wrote to his mother from the Bay of Biscay that he'd been sent to Malta on account of what he described as a debility. There's no indication whether this was physical or psychological. And the only other letter in my possession is from a hospital in Manchester. And the next we hear of him is on the 29th of September 1916, and that was the day of his death. He was, by then, a machine gunner in the 2nd Royal Irish Rifles. He was hit by one of those stray shells, which didn't seem to him anyway to do much damage in Gallipoli. Now, one of the odd quirks of fate places 2 men, completely unknown to each other, as far as I'm aware, side by side in this book, in this Roll of Honour. John Patrick O'Reilly's entry is on page 92. Right next to him, on the following page, is the entry of one Sergeant William O'Reilly of the Royal Irish Fusiliers, who died on the 6th of October 1917. Their only connection, insofar as I'm aware, is myself. After the appearance of the book from which I quoted, Irish Voices from the Great War, I was contacted by a woman called Eilish Lamb, who was a resident of Navan and a nurse in St Mary's Orthopaedic Hospital in Kappa. And she wanted to know, would I like to see the letters sent by her grandfather, William O'Reilly from Courtubber, near Kingscourt, which were sent from the Western Front between 1914 and 1917. And they were sent to his sister-in-law, Annie Smith from Kilmainham Wood. And they concerned his young daughter, Anna. You might ask why he was sending letters to his sister-in-law about his daughter. Well, the reason was because Kate, his wife, had died of peritonitis shortly after giving birth in 1914. He had out on the Western Front when the child was born. And the correspondence was so incredibly poignant that I devoted 8 pages of a second book on the Irish experience in World War I, They Shall Grow Not Old, to telling the story of William O'Reilly. He became a prisoner of war in Germany in 1914. He was released in December 1916 to a sanatorium in Switzerland, already in bad health. None of his sister-in-law's letters to him survive, but they clearly contained lots of information about this small child of her sister's that she was bringing up on her own in Kilmainham Wood. And you can sense that she's doing a very good job telling her brother-in-law about how his daughter is growing up. Sadly, the closest that William O'Reilly got to Anna was a hospital in London, where he wrote in September 1917 of his intense excitement at the prospect of seeing her. The second last letter in the collection is from a nurse, warning Annie to make the journey to London with Anna as soon as possible. He died, unfortunately, 3 days later without ever seeing his daughter. And the last item in the collection is his death certificate. He died of inflammation of the kidneys and a blood infection. These are just 2 stories. There are 652 stories in this book. I've just told you 2 of them. I don't know the other stories. Some of them, obviously, you will know because they are highlighted in the book. It's hard to read a collection of letters like that, though, without thinking about the quiet sense of duty and obligation and a preparedness to make sacrifices that characterised that Edwardian generation. It's also difficult to read those letters, I have to say, without reflecting on the lies, the propaganda, and the cynical exploitation of ordinary men by the establishment of their day. And that is why it is important that we remember today and that we continue to remember. There are those who would suggest that this form of commemoration has had its day. The World War I commemoration has served its purpose. It was very useful in the peace process. But it's a bit old hat now. It's time to move on and find some other part of our history that's sexy and taps into the zeitgeist. Don't listen to those arguments. There is no better time than the present to remember. Remember John Patrick O'Reilly and William O'Reilly. Remember Patrick Brady from Cootehill. Remember John Dolan from Belturbet. Remember James Smith from Ballyjamesduff. Remember the 652 men from Cavan who died in the Great War so that there would never be a greater war, which of course there was. They may not have asked enough questions about what was being asked of them. Unlike them, we need to question our leaders at every step of the way to hold them to account. In the last 4 years, we've seen what happens when we don't. But Pat and William O'Reilly, Patrick Brady, John Dolan, James Smith, and the 647 others in this book had something I'm not sure that we still have. They had a simple sense of duty to their community, which they were prepared to uphold with their own lives. Not, I have to say, that I am advocating this as a viable or desirable course of action. We are fortunate. We are unlikely ever to be asked to do what they were prepared to do. They hoped they were going to create a world in which such sacrifices were no longer necessary. They failed to achieve that ambition, but they were never deserving of being forgotten or being ignored. In the words of Tom Kettle, killed at Ginchy in September 1916, the final couplet of the wonderful sonnet he wrote to his daughter that he, like William O'Reilly, would never see. He said, "The Irish dead of the Great War died not for flag, nor king, nor emperor, but for a dream born in a herdsman's shed, and for the secret scripture of the poor." I want to congratulate all of the people who were involved in this enterprise and in producing this book, and I would hope that, I don't know, perhaps by 2014, the 100th anniversary of the outbreak of the war, or by 2018, the 100th anniversary of the armistice, that every county in Ireland will have produced a book just like this. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you, Myles, for sharing your personal experience with us, your thought-provoking views as well. Our Next speaker is a member of the Peace Partnership who visited the battlefields in June 2011, the recently elected chairperson of Cavan County Council, Councillor Paddy O'Reilly.
First of all, I would like to extend a very warm welcome to each and every one of you here at Cavan this morning. In particular, I welcome Minister Fergus O'Dowd here, who's deputising today on behalf of the Minister for Justice, Mr. Alan Shaw. It is fitting with remembering that we have chosen to launch Peace 3 Phase 2 alongside the Roll of Honour, a comprehensive record of and a tribute to the Cavan men who died in World War I. This project benefited from funding in Phase 1 and Phase 2. Phase 1 saw 2 groups of Peace 3 participants and Peace Partnership board members visit the Messiahs in Belgium, facilitated by the International School for Peace to the Peace 3 networking programme. This trip provided the participants with a fascinating insight into the history of how, during World War I, Irish men, Protestant and Catholic, with their differences aside and fought together. As a result of these visits, the participants wanted to recognise in some way the contribution of these young men from Cavan who had been forgotten by so many. The World War I statue, Fá Ballet, a memorial statue, was erected in Phase 1. It is fitting that we hold today's ceremony there in recognition of Cavan's fallen. 652 men from Cavan, a complete cross-section of society from every part of the county. Men from every religion signed up for their own reasons. Members of the Irish Republican Brotherhood, members of the Orange Lodges, nationalists and unionists. Men signed up for a paycheck or for a higher political goal. The ages of men ranged from 2 15-year-olds, James Kelleher and Thomas Kerr, to James McKeever, who was 67 years of age. The men of Cavan fought with the British, American, New Zealand, Australian and Canadian armed forces. I am sure I speak for all beneficiaries of Peace 3 monies, and I thank the special European Union programme body who managed Peace 3 European structural funds in Northern Ireland and in the border region for their contribution over the years. As today is my first ceremony as Chairman of Cavan County Council, if I might for a moment leave aside my prepared script and just give a short reflection. This morning when I left my farm outside Virginia, I passed the ruins of an old home of a young man who left it at about 18 years of age. He lived in the townland of Murmur, and I tell the story as told to me by my late father who knew him. He left his home that morning, and as he passed the turn on the Murmur Road, he stood for one last time and he waved to his mother. It was the last time that she was to see him. The next communication she would have was by telegram to tell her that her son Luke Delaney had died in action. Every telegram seemingly, regardless of the circumstances, they all died in action. On the trip to Marseille, I was somewhat excited about it, not knowing what was ahead of me. And I would like to thank Glenn Barr for his contribution to this trip. Without him, we would not have seen it, nor would we know today in some way what those unfortunate poor people went through at those difficult times. But I was looking everywhere, and on every step of the way for his memory, and nowhere could I find the name of Luke Delaney. I would like that the many Luke Delaneys, whose names appear nowhere, but who one could try to understand because of the horrific circumstances, even of the first day in battle, if they could not all be recorded. I would like to remember also today the people who returned from the battles, the people who lived through it, but who maybe in hindsight would have been sorry that they did, because of the circumstances that awaited their arrival when they came home. Changed circumstances from they left, but unfortunately many of them were shell-shocked or bewildered from their horrific experiences. Their names do not appear anywhere. They were perhaps better off they had died. Not even in their own local graveyard are they recognised. Many members are recognised by one section of the community, and it is wrong that they are not recognised by all sections. I would hope that today would bring closure to that. I would like that they will be remembered because they left home with a dream. Many were lured by many different reasons. One of them was home for Christmas, but there was to be no home or no Christmas for many of them. They were some mother's son. They were our own. May God give them a happy home wherever they are today.
Thank you, Chairman. And I doubt it will be a more momentous day in your year ahead than today. Our next speaker was then chairperson of Cavan County Council when the Roll of Honour was being edited, Councillor Sean McKiernan.
Thank you very much, Ger. Fellow members of the Platform Party, I won't delay proceedings by going through them individually. To allude to my successor, Councillor Paddy Riley, I think this is indeed a very momentous day. The Town Hall in which we stand is 104 years old. The town, of which it is the administrative building, is 402 years old. The office of Chairman of Cavan County Council, which I gave up on Friday, and which Paddy O'Reilly is now the custodian of, is 113 years old. And I think in that entire space and span of time, there has been no prouder and long anticipated and long awaited day than this. And I want to commend all of you who attend here, the families and friends of the fallen. And you've jammed this town hall to capacity. I hope the fire officer, Noel Burke, didn't receive an invitation to attend. I hope it was lost in the post. But I think this hall is packed even more so, because our Christian faith tells us that death is not the end. And I'm very certain that there are 652 very proud individuals amongst us in spirit. And I think they would say thank you to Cavan Peace Partnership and to Cavan County Council. They would say thank you to Angie Sutherland, the researcher, who worked so diligently this past year. They would say thank you indeed to another of my predecessors, Winston Bennett, who I can just about see with these spotlights in my eyes. I can just about see him. And he would have floated this idea a great deal on a local level also. In my foreword in the book, which ego would demand, I hope you give it a little bit of a read, I would have said, I was reminded of my late party leader, James Dillon, probably one of the greatest orators this country ever saw. And when he was retiring from public life, he was asked what was the ideology that informed him, his thinking, what were his beliefs, what did he think of the left-right divide, and was there a need for it in Irish politics? And he said he did not believe in a left-right divide in politics. He believed in freedom versus tyranny. And Myles Dungan has elucidated in a way that I won't take on to the many historically recorded reasons, and there are many and varied, and some of them deeply personal, as to why people took up arms in that war to end all war, which sadly didn't. But I think the overriding emotion and desire was one of freedom. Be it the freedom of small nations, be it the freedom of Ireland, be it the freedom of Ireland from home rule, be it the personal freedom that travel and adventure and wage was going to bring. Freedom is what underpinned people's participation in that conflict. And the net result of that is that we do live in, because of their sacrifice and the sacrifice of World War II, we do thankfully live in a relatively stable, sometimes problematic, Europe, but at least we solve our differences now by dialogue and endless summits, even if they do go on till 4 or 5 in the morning. I think that is far better than the price the young men paid in the roll of honour today. And I want to also acknowledge the presence of Minister Fergus O'Dowd, who gives national government recognition to what is happening here today. And I think the government is to be commended for pardoning the 5,000 people who took up arms against the Nazi terror in World War II also. They did that very recently. Last night I was out, we had a festival in Bailborough, and I was out enjoying myself, not too late because I was conscious of this event and having to speak at it. But there are lots of young people of 16 and 17 and 18 and 19 out enjoying themselves, and despite the problems in the country, enjoying themselves without a care in the world, or certainly they gave no public manifestation of having a care in the world. And I suppose people may belittle politics and the work of politicians, but I think all of us should strive to ensure that that generation, whatever else might happen to them, that they never have to leave this country bearing arms or to die. So may all of those people rest in peace, and well done to all of the people, in whatever way, big or small, who have made this great day happen. Thank you.
Thank you, Sean. The launch of the Roll of Honour could not have happened without the support of a special EU programme body. The programme body is a North-South implementation body sponsored by the Department of Finance and Personnel in Northern Ireland and the Department of Finance in Ireland. The Roll of Honour has benefited from funding in Phase 2 and Phase 1 and Phase 2 of the Peace Tree programme. And much has been achieved throughout the county in Phase 1 of the Peace Tree programme. And here we wish to thank for their support David Clark of the programme body and Brendan Bulger from Pobble. In Cavan, the programme was previously led by my predecessor Joe McLaughlin, supported by Orla Brady, and now it's under the leadership of Paddy Townsend and Jane Crudden, and with a great contribution from the whole Peace Tree team. I wish to formally acknowledge the great work being carried out under the Peace programme in Cavan. But now the challenge is to build on that. So I now call on Mr. Pat Colgan, Chief Executive of the SEUPB, to launch Phase 2 of the Peace Tree programme.
Thank you very much, Ger. It is genuinely a great privilege to be here with you here today. I'm thinking especially of those people who are relatives, friends, descendants of the people that we're remembering here today. It must be a day that you probably thought would never come, but it's like so many days that we've had over the last 2 decades, let's say, which we all thought would never come. We're in a place, I suppose, that we never thought we would be, and it is a great tribute to all of you here and the people on the ground who have made this possible. Myles Dungan spoke about a maturity in this country over the last 20 years or so. I'm very privileged to be Chief Executive of an organisation which many of you may not have heard of, but it works behind the scenes to be part of that maturing process. SEUPB was set up as part of the Good Friday Agreement, one of the implementation bodies. We're one of 6. And its role in life is to take money from Europe, take money from the British and Irish government and the Northern Ireland Executive and make it available to people like yourselves to do the kind of wonderful things that we're seeing here today. It started in 1994, the first peace programme, an auspicious year, a year of the first significant ceasefire, the IRA ceasefire. And at that time, the 3 MEPs and the President of the Commission, Jacques Delors, said, if there was positive development in Ireland in relation to the conflict, Europe would not be found wanting. And I think it's fair to say that Europe has not been found wanting. From 94 up to 2000, there was 500 million euro made available to invest in this region. Since then, that was the Peace 1 programme. The second Peace programme kicked off in the year 2000 and finished in the year 2006. And over that period, 999 million euro were spent in the region as a result of the Peace 2 programme. That's an awful lot of money. The Peace programme is now in its third incarnation, and by the end of our period of this programme, which will be at the end of 2013, we will have spent 333 million. So that's an awful lot of contribution from Europe, and I think from the two governments, to make all of this possible. Over the years, I think it's fair to say that the peace programmes have become the peace process of the people, the peace process on the ground. They were different from and separate from the big peace process that was happening between the governments and between the major players. But there was the activity on the ground where people were reaching out to each other, were stepping across the border many times for the first time, and reaching out within their communities and beyond their communities. If I give you some numbers, just to give you some sense of the scale of it, the Peace 2 programme from 2000 to 2006, we funded over 15,000 projects. 15,000 projects like this one we're talking about here today. We engaged with 850,000 individual participants across Northern Ireland and the border counties of Ireland. There were 250,000 people who got involved in cross-border activities. So I think it's fair to say that the peace programmes have probably touched every community, every family, every nook and cranny of this region. I think it's appropriate that we're here today remembering a violent, bloody war and those who died in it. And even after the violence of that war, it still wasn't enough for the people of Europe and the world to say, this is not the way to deal with our problems. We had another one that followed it. And it took to get to the end of that Second World War for the people of Europe to say that is enough. And out of that came the seeds and the beginnings of the European Union, the European Initiative, which is the greatest peace movement, greatest peace development we've seen. I think it's entirely appropriate that that European Union then subsequently reached favourably into our region to help us to start to solve our own conflict. And I think it's appropriate that we should be here to recognise and pay tribute to that today. The current programme, Peace 3 programme, has one very, very important part of it, and that is the one in which we work with local authorities. We call it building positive relationships at a local level. We have spent already about 50 million through the local authorities in Northern Ireland and in the border counties. And we are now moving into a second phase in which we will spend a similar sum. And that's where this phase 1, phase 2 thing comes from. This project that we're celebrating here today is part of phase 1. We're now moving into a second phase from now until the end of 2015, in which we will continue this kind of work. It is a great tribute to the local authorities, the county managers, chief executives of local authorities in Northern Ireland, the officials, the elected representatives who sit without being paid on these committees and make these things happen. But I think probably more importantly, the people on the ground who come up with the ideas and the suggestions and the projects which are capable of absorbing these funds and make such a huge difference on the ground. So, as a programme manager, I take great pride in being here today to see the fruits of the work and to congratulate those of you who have made all of this possible. To wish you success with the rest of your work. There's a lot to be done. We know how far we've come. I totally agree there's a maturity here now which has not been around before, but I think you and all of us recognise that there is still a long way to go. We are, in fact, in the process of preparing for a fourth generation of the peace programme, which hopefully will kick off in 2014, which I think will continue to address the very difficult issues that still remain within our society. And we still have a lot of work to do to reach out to one another. Thank you for listening to me. Congratulations on this project. I'm delighted now to declare phase 2 of the Peace 3 action plan in Cavan officially launched, and we look forward to continuing to work with you in the years ahead. Thank you.
Thank you, Pat. Like everybody here today, we're about it. The Peace Programme has touched every community in County Cavan, and we're glad to hear about Peace Programme Phase 4. I'm now calling the chairperson of the Peace Partnership Board, Mr. Jack Keys, Cavan County Manager. Yes.
Mayor, Chairman, Minister, Your Excellency, representatives from all of the various bodies and embassies, Pat Colgan, Myles Dungan, and the representatives from the Defence Forces, and in particular, again, to re-welcome all of you who are here today on this, possibly one of the most important days I've certainly been part of in Cavan over the last 8 years. As a council, Cavan County Council has put huge emphasis, not just in fulfilling a role in the peace programme, but in doing it in the most active and dynamic way that we can. It is an absolute corporate priority of us. This work is of such importance, and there's been a lot of eloquent contributions which I won't go back over, but just again to welcome the launch of the Phase 2 of Peace 3 programme. As Pat Colgan has rightly said, there's a lot done, and Myles Dungan's eloquent description that we have matured as a country, but there is a distance to go yet, and I think that's something we all know in our hearts. I'd just like to maybe show you something that I found in my own cupboard in my own home. About 4 years ago, 5 years ago, 2 medals from the First World War, and they belong to a granduncle of mine, apparently, a man called Jim Keys, were sent out to Mr. J. Keys, 23 Woodstock Street, Athy, County Kildare, after the war was finished. These medals have never been seen outside of our home until today. I contacted 10 members, cousins, etc. Of my family over the last few weeks. None of them were aware of the medals. So I asked myself why, and I think the answer is self-evident. There was a silence about the issue. I was vaguely aware of this granduncle who had fought in the war, but there was never a subject for discussion in our home. And I'm just so happy from a personal point of view, but also I think I represent all of your thoughts on this, that now we are at a stage where we can be so proud of these people and their achievements. That, I think, puts into context what the Phase 2 of the Peace 3 programme is. It's that ongoing journey that we must make together to reach further degrees of maturity in our country. There is a lot of work, as I said earlier on, to be done still, and we look forward very much as a local authority to providing leadership on that. Can I thank you all sincerely for your presence, and I think it is going to be a day that's going to stay in our memories, but particularly the range of very, 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 I suppose, high-powered and responsible people who have come here today. I don't remember any other occasion in Cavan where we've had a collection of so many senior people from various organisations and embassies, and also to thank the Minister again for coming along at relatively short notice, and it's very much appreciated. I'd like to acknowledge the work of the staff of the Peace section in Cavan County Council under Ger Finn's leadership, Paddy Connaughton and Jane and all of the other people who contributed hugely, and Angie Sutherland, who put a huge amount of effort into this book. Can I acknowledge the ongoing support of Pat Colgan and SCUPB for our initiatives, not just in the peace programme, but in a number of other areas, and just to say how really important they are to the development of our county, and how we really have benefited from working closely with SCUBB. To mention the elected members who have been an inspiration in this area. But can I just finish maybe with one story that goes back a little bit to the medals. 6 years ago we had a discussion among a number of elected members about the possibility of doing the book. And you know when you're at a meeting and nobody says anything, but you know this thing isn't moving, and you decide, let's just leave it for the moment. And that's what I did at the time, because I felt there wasn't exactly a murmur of enthusiasm around the room. Not because the individuals didn't believe in the work of the book, but perhaps it was just that little bit too early. Hence we waited 3-4 years. And it's great now that decision was taken. Everybody unanimously is behind it, right across all of the parties in our council chamber. I think that's a real sign of progress under the peace programme, that little story that I've related to you there. I look forward to the rest of the day, to the replaying. I'd like to thank the Army Band and the Cavan Rugby Club Choir for their input, and you'll be hearing more of them later on. I look forward to meeting many of you individually at the reception in the library later on. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Manager. We didn't expect a particular surprise here today. I'm sharing your experience. Now, we've come to our final speaker to officially launch the Roll of Honour. Is Minister Fergus O'Dowd. We thank the Minister for his commitment to this project and for agreeing to launch the Roll of Honour. Minister.
Is mór an an ordamsa ben seo an jobh an ócáid starúil seo, gúlanis go léir tagathe go dtí an áit seo chun commemorate na fear as chundé Cavan a fuórbás san céad cogadh mór down a bhí ann. Tugann sé áthas mór dom a bheith seo á ceann an rialtas. And I want to say that I'm very happy to be here on behalf of the government on this very important occasion. And to thank the Chairman of the County Council, Paddy Riley, the Mayor of Cavan Town, Des Cullen. I met Heather Humphreys, my deputy colleague here coming in, Sean here, and Deanie Ellen Shaw from all over. I really couldn't be more proud to be here today. And I know we all come here from different parts of the country, and I know that this is honouring people who died a long, long, long time ago, but whose sacrifice is remembered publicly here. We're shining a light on our history here today, and we are all of us, each of us, acknowledging the importance of that, the sacrifice that those men and indeed their families made in that very difficult time, and how those families have come together here today, and many of their relatives are here to show how much we acknowledge the importance of your predecessors. I suppose one thing we could say is that we can go back further than just the names that are here. We can go back to the 1901 census, we can go back to the 1911 census, and we can look at who our ancestors were, where did they live, how did they live, what families did they come from, what was the social background that they came from. And we can find out things like I found in my family. For instance, I found out in 1901, something I'm very proud of, by the way, down in West Kerry, where I come from, where my father came from, my great-grandfather and great-grandmother lived there at that time. Neither of them could read nor write, and the only language they could speak was Irish. And out of that home came one of my uncles. He was obviously an older brother of my father's, and he fought in the fight for independence with the IRA during the battle for independence. And on the other side, if I go and look where my mother came from, and she came from County Sligo, they didn't speak Irish there. But one of her brothers fought and died in the Second World War, fighting with the RAF. So I can say for my family, and I'm sure if we look at all our families, we have a joining together in our families through their social activities, through their community activities, to who they married. They made us what we are and who we are today. So we're all proud of that fantastic heritage of our past, and of your heritage, particularly here in Cavan. And each and every one of those families and those names are recorded in this book. So I want to say, Excellencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, and most particularly the members of County Cavan Peace Tree Peace and Reconciliation Partnership Group, I'm absolutely delighted to be here today. I'm also pleased that we're joined today by the Belgian Ambassador, His Excellency Robert de Vries, representatives of Allied forces in World War I from Britain, America, Germany and New Zealand. I would also like to acknowledge the presence of the President of the British Legion in the Republic of Ireland and the Assistant Regimental Secretary of the Royal Irish Regiment. So I just want to finish, because we've heard many speeches today, and I thought about what could I say, what would be important to me and important maybe to you to reach across those years, and they are many years ago. What could I speak about? Could I quote from that wonderful book, All's Quiet on the Western Front? Could I quote from Yeats's poetry? But I found a different poem, one which was written by a teenage soldier. He was a teenager. He died in the Second World War. He was John Gillespie McGee. And it's a poem he wrote when he was 19 years of age, 3 months before he was actually killed in an air accident. And it's High Flight. Oh, I have slipped the surly bonds of earth and danced the skies on laughter's silvered wings. Sunward I've climbed and joined the tumbling mirth of sun-spilled clouds, and done 100 things you have not dreamed of. Wheeled and soared and swung high in the sunlit silence. Hovering there, I chased the shouting wind along and flung my eager craft through footless halls of air. Up, up the long delirious burning blue, I've topped the windswept heights with easy grace, where never lark or even eagle flew. And while with silent lifting mind, I've trod the high untrespassed sanctity of space, put out my hand and touched the face of God. Thank you.
I now call on members of Cavan, Corlin and Oig to recite poems. We have Paula Moffat, Darrell McAdoo and Lorna Moffat.
In Flanders Field by John McGraw. In Flanders fields the poppies blow, between the crosses row on row, that mark our place, and in the sky the larks still bravely singing fly, scarce heard among the guns below. We are the dead short days ago, we lived, felt dawn, saw sunset glow, loved and were loved, and now we lie in Flanders field. Take up our quarrel with the foe, to you from failing hands we throw, the torch be yours to hold it high, if ye break faith with us who die. We shall not sleep, through poppies grow in Flanders field.
A Soldier's Grave by Francis Ledwidge. Then in the lull of midnight, gentle arms lifted him slowly down the slopes of death, lest he should hear again the mad alarms of battle, dying moans and painful breath. And where the earth was soft for flowers he made a grave for him that he might better rest. So spring shall come and leave its seat arrayed, and there the lark shall turn for dreary nest.
To my daughter Betty, in wiser days my darling rosebud, blown to beauty proud as your mother's prime. In that desired, delayed, incredible time, you'll ask why I abandoned you, my own, and the dear heart that was your baby's throne, to die with death. And oh, they'll give you rhyme and reason. Some will call the thing sublime, and some decry it in a knowing tone. So hear, while the mad guns curse overhead, and tired men sigh with mud for couch and floor, know that we fools, now with the foolish dead, died not for flag, nor king, nor emperor, but for a dream, born in a herdsman's shed, and for the secret scripture of the poor.
Thank you, Lorna, Paul and Darrell. I now invite Father Sean McDermott, chaplain to the forces, to lead us in prayer.
Let us pray. Let us commend and commemorate to the loving mercy of our Heavenly Father, the Shepherd of souls, the giver of life, life everlasting, those who have died in the Great War, 650 over and more from Cavan alone are recorded in the Roll of Honour, County Cavan's World War I Dead Book. Let us pray for those who suffer as a result of conflict and ask that God may give us peace. For the service of men and women who have died in violence of war, each one remembered by and known to God, may God give them peace. For those who love them in death as in life, offering the distress of our grief and the sadness of our loss, may God give us peace. For all members of the armed forces who are in danger this day, remembering their families and friends, and all who pray for their safe return, may God give us peace. For civilian women, children and men whose lives are disfigured by war or terror, calling to mind the anger and the hatred of humanity, may God give us peace. For peacemakers and peacekeepers who seek to keep this world secure and free, may God give us peace. For all who bear the burden and privilege of leadership, political, military and religious, asking for the gift of wisdom and resolve in search for reconciliation and peace, may God give us peace. So let us pray. O God of truth and justice, we hold before you those whose memory we cherish and those whose names we will never know. Help us to lift our eyes above the torment of this broken world, and grant us the grace to pray for those who wish us harm. As we honour the past, may we put our faith in your future, for you are the source of life and hope. This we ask through Christ our Lord. May the Lord bless us and keep us free from all evil, and bring us to life eternal. Amen. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen.
Thank you, Father Sean. We now come to the wreath laying ceremony. And on behalf of the Irish Government, I call on Minister Fergus O'Dowd TD. On behalf of the people of Cavan, call on Cathaoirleach Paddy O'Reilly. Of the Peace Partnership, Mr. Jack Keys. Of the British Legion, Mr. David O'Murha. On behalf of the Irish Defence Forces, Colonel Ger Finn. Of the Royal Irish Regiment, Major McPeak. We have Defence Force Commandant Terry O'Connor. From the SEU Programmes Body, Mr. Pat Colgan. Belgium Ambassador, Mr. Robert de Vries. Represent the German Embassy, Mr. Peter Zangroff. Representing the British Embassy, Mr. John Webster. Representing the New Zealand Embassy, Mr. Alan McCarthy. Representing the American Embassy, Master Sergeant George Sands. From the ex-serviceman of the Nation to the here in Toronto, ex-Defence Sergeant Ray O'Loughlin. And from the Irish Defence Forces, Lieutenant Colin Kavanagh. No. Sorry. How do you win? Oh, sorry. And sorry, Mr. Glenbar. Late. I asked to invite Glenbar. Sorry about that. Thank you. As you see, crosses have already been laid. There's 639 crosses already laid. We now invite representatives of a number of families to lay a number of crosses to bring us up to the 652 people who lost their lives in this war. I invite Myles Dungan on behalf of his granduncle J.P. O'Reilly Bailieborough, who died on the 29th of September 1916. I invite Angie Sutherland, who was instrumental in producing this book, on behalf of her second cousin Alexander Sutherland, Mill Street, Cavan. He died on the 7th of September 1915 in France, aged 19. Invite Patrick McGowan on behalf of his uncle, Lawrence Joseph McGowan Dromilis Drumconic. He was a private in the Royal Irish Battalion Fusiliers. And the eldest of three. As his father was dead, Lawrence was the breadwinner and enlisted in 1913, and he was killed in 1917. Frances Meehan, niece of Peter Farley, Private 9th Battalion Royal Munster Fusiliers, died March 1916, age 47. Mr. Tom Kelleher, here on behalf of his uncle James Kelleher, Kildua born boy, private in the 4th Battalion Royal Irish Fusiliers. He died of pneumonia aged only 15 in March 1916. He was buried in Belfast. By Patrick Gaffney on behalf of his uncle James Gaffney, Ballintemple, Ballinya. He killed in action on the 8th of October 1918, aged 31. His brother Michael also served in the war and returned home after the war. Harold Johnson, laying a cross on behalf of his uncle James Fraser Johnson, Black Line. He was in the Royal Irish Fusiliers and died aged 20 on the 25th of March 1918. Mr. Paddy Murphy on behalf of his uncle Hugh Murphy from Mount Nugent. He was a Lance Corporal in the 1st Battalion Royal Irish Rifles, died on the 6th of December 1916 and buried in La Tour, France. Now I invite Berta Harkins on behalf of her uncle Irvine Montgomery, Castle Poles, Arva, of James Talbot and Williams Talbot from Corbeil, Cootehill. James was private in the 10th Battalion, North Irish Horse, and transferred to the Royal Inniskillen Fusiliers, killed the 7th of June 1917, and his brother was private in the 2nd Battalion Irish Guards, killed in action 27th of November 1917. Now invite Doris Allison from Peace Partnership for David John Macaulay, Castle Saunderson, Belturbet. He died on the 16th of August 1917, aged 33. Finally, we invite Anne McPhillips from the Peace Partnership for Marshal Coulter Macaulay, Castle Saunderson, Sergeant 13th Battalion Royal Irish Rifles, died aged 27. Now call for a minute's silence. Now call for the Piper's Lament. Now we have the last post and reveille.
I'm joined now by Sabina Donoghue, who is curator of the Cavan Museum in Ballyjamestuff, and we're surrounded by artefacts from World War I that we'll be showing you now in a few minutes. But Sabina very kindly is going to tell us all about it, and this stuff will be on display in the Cavan Museum. Sabina, fantastic stuff here. A brilliant day all round.
Well, a brilliant day all round, and it's a great day. I know this is not happening in the museum, but in many ways it's a fantastic day for the museum because we were able to bring an exhibition, as you said, of our World War I memorabilia in here to Cavan. We have a lovely collection of memorabilia of World War I, and just during this week, Paul, we acquired a large amount of General Sir Oliver Nugent's memorabilia in relation to when he fought in the wars, the World War I.
General Sir Oliver Nugent.
General Sir
Tell
Oliver
us the history
Nugent.
of him.
Well, Mount Nugent in County Cavan is called after the General. The General was born in 1860. He died in 1926, and he fought in the wars, and he brought everything back with him to Mount Nugent when he was coming home. And the Stoney family have very kindly donated this now on loan to Cavan County Museum. So I actually only picked it up this week.
This is stuff we're going to be looking at now in a few moments, but it will be on display.
It will be on display, and hopefully we would be hoping that we would add more and gain more memorabilia that will make the story even bigger and tell a better story for visitors to the museum.
And he was an officer in command.
He was, yes, General, yes.
And was he in the Somme?
He was in the Somme.
And survived. So he'd have been a horseback soldier, so to speak.
Yes, he was, and we have more of his memorabilia now back in the museum that I didn't bring in today. That will verify that he was on horseback. We have a lot more in the museum than we actually have on display here.
On the talk that was being given earlier in the town hall, there was a beautiful uniform.
Yes.
On the stage. Now we hope to get a shot of that later on. That's from the museum as well.
That's from the museum, but it's not General Sir Oliver Nugent's uniform.
But it is a First World War.
It is a First World War uniform.
Where did you get that?
Well, actually, and I have to be honest, we got that on loan from Monaghan County Museum. We do have one ourselves, but it's locked in a case. So Monaghan County Museum kindly loaned us that uniform.
You'll have to give them something back.
Well, they'll give me, and I'll give them something back too. But no, we share between museums. We pass artefacts and memorabilia around to suit occasions.
And have you a special World War I section up in the museum?
Not yet. But now, as you can see, after acquiring the Nugent memorabilia, we are seriously looking, and we have a gallery earmarked for a World War I exhibition.
Well, Serena, if you want to ask the people there,
that's just good to say. If anybody had anything that they'd like to donate to the museum, and people must remember, please remember, you don't have to give it permanently to the museum. You just give it on loan. We'll be the custodians of it, and we'll mind it. Put it on display if we can. If it's not on display, it'll be in our archive in proper environmental conditions for artefacts. So sometimes people think if they give something to the museum, they'll never get it back. It's not like that.
And what a lot of people think too is they might have something that they think is insignificant.
Oh, you're so right, Paul.
It could be buttons.
Yes, and or documents or anything. That pieces together stories, and especially for young people coming to the museum, we can tell them stories. We can tell them how life used to be and how their grandfathers, great grandfathers lived and fought and everything. So it's invaluable for us to pass on the history, especially the history of County Cavan.
A different history. Like Sabina said there, you can see all these artefacts. Now have a look at them. Joined by Dwayne Martin, and Dwayne is an anthropologist and historian. And did you work with the Cavan Museum, Dwayne?
Yes, I do. I'm a researcher there.
And Dwayne here is going to talk us through these amazing pieces that will be on display in the County Museum in Ballyjamestuff. I'll get Dwayne to explain what stuff is here, and anything in general here we can focus in on and have a look at. Number one, Dwayne, what's this we have here?
This is an old telegraph radio set given to us by the family of General Sir Oliver Nugent. Essentially the same as a modern radio, but a little bit older, a little bit rustier. This is the battery that was inserted inside it.
This was the main means of communication in the field? In
the field, and also this set here would have been wired up to it and attached to it whilst they were sitting at the desk in the general headquarters as well.
And how did it transmit, because it's wireless?
I'm not an electronic person. No, I don't actually know. As far as I'm aware, this is Morse code. This was actually attached to a set of wires. So I'm not sure if it was wireless or not.
From the battlefield, so to speak.
Yes, from the headquarters in somewhere near the battlefield. The generals didn't tend to be very near the battlefield. So.
And would there have been an officer in charge of this himself? One man's job?
We know that this was General Nugent's. I don't know if he personally was in charge of it or he had a junior person doing it. So.
To communicate what was going on. Right, we'll go to this next case here now. And you can see the telescope first of all. These were all used in the battlefield.
Yes. This was again General Nugent's personal telescope in his personal effects, and it still functions perfectly. It extends out to much larger than the case actually is, and although it's not quite as good as a set of binoculars, it would give you the face of a person coming towards you, but you wouldn't be able to see troop movements over a mile away or anything like that. It's more for picking out details.
And the compass?
The compass is a compass, pretty much standard as compasses are these days as well. Still works.
And if in the middle there, Mick, I don't know if you can get it there.
Yeah, right in the middle is something quite interesting. Each of those inside the red leather case are maybe 8. Yes, there's 8 individual sachets, inside which is a sort of almost laminated rectangle, which can be cut up into smaller squares. Each of which is then taken. One of them is aspirin, one of them is bismuth subnitrate. Not entirely sure what that does, but they're all medications for the field. So.
And it's like tab. It's like a tab.
Yeah, it's almost like rice paper or something worse. Yeah. So.
And that was a kind of a medical kit then.
Yeah. Some of them say poison on them as well, so I'm not sure. Is that
It's if you were kept prisoner or
possibly?
Something like that.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So it's probably sign. And his shaving set is there as well.
The shaving set, an essential thing for a general to have on the battlefield. Yeah. It came with a shaving mirror as well, which is a solid wooden, pretty heavy, probably about 10 inches long. Folds up so he could sit there and do his ablutions.
In the corner here we can see the letter edged in black, which is a notification of somebody has been killed.
Yeah, this one was actually a letter from the sister of the deceased to some relatives nearby. Because the family was too distraught to write it themselves, she stepped in and did so.
And it says on it, "Dear Mr. and Mrs. Harland, thank you both very much for your kind letters of sympathy. It has been a terrible shock.
And blow to us all. We typed it up here, so because the handwriting's
none of us can really realise that we shall never see our darling big boy again, or that he is gone from amongst us forever. And I think it makes it all harder to hear that thought of seeing him at home so recently. Looking the picture of health and in such good form." And it goes on to tell you about the tragedy that is war, of course. And
it turns out this soldier was killed by shrapnel in the trench, but apparently he was quick. The shrapnel hit him in the head, so it was relatively painless. Yeah.
Right, and we go round here now to the hardware. Well, I suppose hardware for.
Yeah, this is kind of a general soldier's normal kit.
What's the hand grenade made of? It looks,
iron.
It looks quite heavy.
It's very heavy. It weighs maybe about 2 bags of sugar. About that. And that's
pounds.
Yep. It's
And you'd have these attached to your belt.
You'd have a few of them. On the invitation for this event, we had a picture of a general soldier, and this was everything that was on the invitation. They would have had a bandolier, sort of a leather strap kind of thing around their chest, with a few of them attached to it. You wouldn't throw them very far though. You'd want to be, quite a
good throw. Yeah. And how does a hand grenade work? You pull the pin.
And what
does it release? What does that do?
There's gunpowder inside it, and it's kept under pressure. When it hits something, it basically explodes. All the iron itself. You can see the lines on it.
Yeah.
They're slight indentations to make it slightly weaker at those points, so that it will fly apart once there's an explosion inside. So little bits of iron go flying through the air. Along with the gunpowder as well, the explosion.
And we have another compass here.
We have another compass there, yeah. That's
and the water carrier.
Yeah, pretty standard, carrying water.
Would it be water
or whatever they could find?
Alcohol? Could there be alcohol in it?
They could do if they found any.
Yeah, if they're lucky.
If they happen to be somewhere near a village, they could buy wine off the.
And again,
French.
these are original artifacts from.
These are all original from the
19.
From most of these would be from about 1915, 16.
These were all from 1950. And then we see the helmet back there. And again, it looks a ton weight.
It is, yeah. It's heavy.
You keep it on.
But it was designed to stop things hitting you in the head. It had to be pretty heavy.
For shrapnel and stuff like that. And again, binoculars, as you said earlier.
The binoculars they are slightly more powerful than that telescope we had. The bayonet there is to go onto the end of a Lee Enfield rifle. Now, the rifle itself is probably about 3 foot long, and then that goes on the end of it. It's essentially, you don't want to be anywhere near the thing you're trying to poke with it, so it's...
On the side here, you think the bayonet going on the end of a rifle would be, I suppose, knife size. But here we have
well, they call these sword-type bayonets. You could hold it and use it as a sword.
You could use it as a sword as well, and that's the sheath here.
Yeah, this is the scabbard and the belt that it would be worn with.
Like we said earlier, General Nugent would have been on horseback.
Yes, the scabbard, or the bayonet and the scabbard wouldn't be his. The only thing in this case is the compass and the binoculars. Right. Everything else is, we're not entirely sure which soldier owned them, but they're...
Would this have been standard issue too?
Yeah, standard issue. The bayonet was designed in 1907. This is called a pattern 1907 bayonet. And they were issued right the way through the war. Some of them issued 4 or 5 times the same bayonet. They have little stampings on them to say which regiment got them, what year it was issued, things like that. And we have found some with multiple stamps. So right the way through into the 1920s and stuff, used for training then later on as well.
Yeah, went on and on. Now, we have these here, but at the end of the war, the soldier survives. He's demobbed.
Yes.
How is an officer allowed to keep them?
Officers bought their own equipment. Okay. Most of the uniforms, their swords, they'd have handmade in places like Savile Row.
Yes,
and they'd be ever so slightly different from officer to officer. They'd have their own little touches on them, their emblem on the collar or stuff like that. Some of the swords we've seen have gold inlay and things like that.
So a bit of competition there.
Yeah, there was a bit of keeping up with the Joneses and trying to outdo your... Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
So, but I mean, you're commanding 100 to 200 men, you might as well look the part.
Yeah.
So,
might as well when you're sending them off to their death. Away you go, boys. Right, we'll come to this final case now here.
Yeah, the final case.
If you want to get a bit closer to this one, this is really fascinating stuff. Trenchman.
The trenchman.
Was war mapped out? There's rules of war.
The First World War was the start of the end of the old rules, in a way. They still stuck to the old rules.
What was the old rules? Was it?
Well, the old rules was lining up and facing off against each other at a specified hour, and then running. Well, the generals wouldn't; they'd be somewhere in the background.
Yeah.
But then the troops would arrange to meet at a certain time, in a certain place, and fight.
And that was war then,
in a way. Yeah.
Yeah.
And the First World War was a sort of continuation of this. They had their lining up in their trenches on opposing sides and.
Right. Give us a brief on the First World War. Right. It was the Germans.
It was the Austro-Hungarian Empire, the Prussians, the Italians, the English, the French, everyone was involved.
Anybody with an interest in history knows that it was so-and-so was shot and that triggered it off.
It's still argued about what the actual cause of World War I was. But yeah, Franz Ferdinand, Archduke Ferdinand, was shot, assassinated. He was the... I can't quite remember now, but he was the Duke of one of the smaller countries, which then the Austro-Hungarian Empire said, okay, we'll back you up. Someone else said, we'll back you up. The Russians got involved, the French got involved.
But what was the point of it? What was the end of it? Like, the Allies won the war.
Yes. Why? There had been a series of agreements already in place between all the different countries, essentially saying we have your back. And then once one of them got involved, everyone else had to then step in for honour, for politics, for the resources they could get out of it. War always ends up the victors getting most of the spoils.
Like it's oil nowadays.
Yeah, it's oil nowadays. Then it was minerals, it was land, it was whatever they could get, really.
Colonialism,
definitely. Yeah, I mean, Britain had so many territories overseas. They had an image to maintain. They couldn't be seen to back down. Now, if we look at the death penny, it's called here, the large copper coin. This was sent out to the family of any soldier who died. But on it, we have the lion, which is the symbol of Britain at the time.
And is that actual size?
That's real. That's
one that was sent to a family.
That's one that was sent to a family, yeah. But they were called death pennies by the soldiers. But they were designed to be a plaque, a memorial plaque for the dead person.
Yeah, because it looks like an old penny.
And I'm pretty sure it's made of the same material as a penny as well, the same mix of metals.
And here's Go on, sorry.
Oh, I was just going to say the lion, the symbol of Britain, the two dolphins on the top were supposed to represent Britain's sea power, and underneath there's a smaller lion attacking an eagle, which was the imperial German symbol at the time. So it was both to commemorate the dead and also to show off Britain's might.
And there's a name on this one, John Duffy.
Yes, he's in the book of the role that we launched today.
Brilliant.
So he's from Cavan.
And everyone's name would be inscribed, whoever.
Yeah, and they decided not to put any rank on it to show the equality of the sacrifice. So it's just the name.
Yeah.
So.
And back here, Victory Medal, 1915 Star.
Yeah.
And the British War Medal.
These were awarded for certain things. The Victory Medal was at the end of the war. The 1915 Star was anyone who had fought up until that point in time. And the British War Medal was given to most soldiers as well for basically for taking part in the war. Anyone who got back.
These are originals?
They're originals, yeah. Everything in these cases is all original.
That's fantastic. And do we know who these belong to?
I don't know. They could say on the back, but I haven't actually looked at the back of these. So.
And again, these two books here, Dwayne, right?
Yeah.
The fascination of rules of war. Like here, you're given a rule book, so to speak.
Well, yeah, this is, and you can see on the front of the France sheet 28 Southwest, the one on the left there, there's the small rectangle greyed out on the front. That's what that map is. And so each of it's kind of like a modern A to Z turn to page, whatever, for that bit. But that's folded up only that one little section, and that in the whole is only one section of France that was being fought over at the time. But this would have only been in the general headquarters. The general soldier wouldn't have had this.
And again, I have to ask you, it seems like an awful lot of preparation for a war.
Yeah.
Before the actual event.
Well, this one is from 1916, August, as far as I remember, inside, and it's stamped on the top the date that is correct up to. And there's hand markings on it showing the position of bunkers, the 9mm howitzers and things like that. They're all marked with a little key at the bottom.
So you know where your enemy's stuff was?
They knew where their stuff was, and they had a rough idea where the enemy stuff was, so that would be kind of marked out in yellow just because they weren't entirely sure where it was. But yeah, there would have been one copy of that in each of the kind of communique bits.
Very poignant now, this is the gift box.
Yeah.
Christmas 1914 is embossed and make a difference in there. The Christmas gift box.
This would have had chocolate inside it. Sent out to every member on the front lines.
Who's that? Queen Victoria?
1914, I think that's just female. Queen Victoria was dead by then. It would have been King George V. So that could be the Queen at the time, his wife. Or it could just be a classical female. Because I know Queen Victoria did send them out as well. She started the tradition of sending chocolates out to the front lines.
And then what would it
that would have been the Boer War. Chocolate.
Chocolate, just chocolate. And just
a big lump
boost
of
morale.
Yeah, boost morale.
And just to get the box itself would have been.
Yeah, the box is actually worth a fair bit. It's empty now, obviously.
Of course.
So the chocolate wouldn't probably have lasted anyway. Or I'm assuming as soon as the soldier got it, he would have eaten it.
And it would have been a good morale booster to get it.
Yeah.
In the trenches at Christmas.
And then it was used afterwards to store tobacco and whatnot.
Yeah. Now here's newspapers from the time.
Yeah, these are all from the Daily Chronicle. Most of these are from 1916. There are some from 1914. There's just a selection to show some of the headlines at the time.
Yeah, fascinating. And as Mick Pan shows, even the advertising, everything was a...
Yeah, there's one down here. If you have a friend training in camp, send him Bovril.
Oh yeah, see this one, Mick. If you have a friend training in camp, sending him Bovril. Yeah. And you see, just looking at them, these are from 1914, right? So Egypt and Aden, all the... War.
That was the news. Yeah. It would have been a good occasion for people to learn about new countries as well.
Yeah.
Most of the common people wouldn't have even heard of half the places they were fighting. So.
The coming big battle in Poland. And again, like we were saying, look at this one, Mick, if you can get this one. GR, King George, that is. GR, yeah? For your king and country need another 100,000 men.
I think it's interesting to note in that they say the height has been reduced to normal standards. They've lowered the age of enlistment. Obviously, at the start of the war, they were taking the best and the fittest, and then they lowered it down. The minimum chest size was 34 inches for a man. That's quite small.
Must be medically fit. 19 to 38.
Yeah.
19 years of age, 38.
This is 1914. Later on, it lowered to 16 to 15 to whatever they could get.
For the Second World War?
And for this as well.
For the 16.
And then obviously the papers weren't quite as accurate as they are these days, so people lied about their age. They said, yes, I'm 19. They're actually 17, 16. As long as you had started shaving, they'd take you.
Yeah, so just... They were willing to take one anyway. Was it desperation?
Not at the start. Later on it was, yeah.
Later on. And what would the wage have been?
I couldn't actually say. It wouldn't have been high, but then you weren't paying rent or anything like that, and your food was provided for you.
Looked after, so to speak.
Until the end.
till you were sent out to kill people. And when it was all over, what then? You just told...
There was a lot of shell shock, is a term we have now. A lot of them came back not knowing what to do. A lot of people had gone over there with no trade, and then their trade was soldiering. So some of them stayed on in the army, as became career soldiers then.
And could you have stayed on? No, once it was over, was it a case of we don't need you anymore?
Yeah, there was a lot of we don't need you anymore. But some people would. If they'd risen in rank at all, they would probably be allowed to stay on.
Kept on.
But a lot of people came home, kept their bayonets, sold the metal, whatever, and tried to get a job. Going back to working on a farm, there was quite a...
no backup, no medical backup as such for...
No NHS back then?
No psychological...
Well, they didn't really know. They didn't have the same theories of psychology as we do now.
It was kind of get up and get on with it.
Yeah, that was the accepted sort of treatment for shock.
Well, Dwayne, it's been fascinating talking to you and telling us all about the artefacts. And are you based in the...
I'm based in the County Museum, yeah, in Ballyjamestoff.
In Ballyjamestoff. And so... Anybody sees you up there now, they have to see you on the table, they're going to start asking you questions that I couldn't think of. But fascinating stuff there from Dwayne Martin. And Dwayne is anthropologist?
By training, yeah, but now museumist, I suppose.
Anthropologist sounds good. Fascinating talking to you. Dwayne Martin from Cavan County Museum. Thanks very much, Dwayne. I'm joined now by Angie Sutherland, and Angie is the author of the book that we're celebrating today. As you can see, it's fantastically presented and everything. Roll of Honour, County Cavan's World War I Dead, and we've had a fantastic day so far. But this is the woman behind the whole thing. And tell us how it started.
With a lot of help from a lot of family members who had people who are actually in the book. A lot of people came forward with photographs, with letters from the trenches, with medals, which are all included in the book. So that was great. A lot of input from a lot of families.
And where did the idea come from? Like, was it an idea that you mooted and talked about over a cup of tea and said, I wonder how many people represented Cavan during the First World War? Or
it's been in the pipeline a long time, actually, since 1998, when Mary McAleese, who was the then president, suggested that every county should have a roll of honour to honour the dead from World War I, because most counties had never done anything like this, and up until now Cavan had never done anything. So it's really been in the pipeline since that, and it's in the last sort of year and a half that it all came together.
And it's come to fruition in this, which is a pretty big book.
So a lot of content, but as I said, a lot of interest from the family members.
And did you edit as well?
Yes, everything from start to finish.
Research?
Yes.
Where did you start, Angie?
The Commonwealth Graves Commission was a big source of information. Went out to a lot of the Protestant and Catholic churches throughout the county, a lot of graveyards, a lot of the census reports. So a little bit of everything, and then talking to the actual families as well. We advertised for families to come forward who had information on relatives they knew had died in World War I.
And it's changed times when we can do this now, because 25 years ago you couldn't have done anything like this.
No,
like was said in the speeches in the town hall, that it was a kind of a taboo subject.
Very much so.
Not that people didn't want to know, because families knew and had their own sense of pride within themselves, but they couldn't tell the neighbours or anything like that.
No, it was never sort of made public before now, but thanks to the funding from the SEUPB, it's now in book format.
And when the families did come forward, were they apprehensive? Were they saying, I'd love to tell you, but...
Some were a little bit, but when we told them what the outcome was going to be and that their actual relatives were going to be honoured, then they were quite happy to come forward with stories, with letters, with medals, whatever old memorabilia that they had. I think a lot of families were glad that their relatives were actually finally going to be honoured for what they did. And in the course of my own research, I found a first cousin of my father's who died out in France, aged 19. He was a corporal, that I never knew anything about, or my family never knew anything about. So it was great to sort of come across that bit of information as well.
And did you go, oh my God, this is it's come back to me now.
It makes it all the more poignant for me, having had somebody actually in the book and having only found him through doing the research for the book.
Did you sit and think to yourself, here was this, how old was he?
He was 19 when he died.
19 when he died?
Yeah, and he was a corporal at that stage, so he must have been quite young when he joined up.
And left Ireland and went to...
Left Ireland, said goodbye to the family, and was probably never seen after he left.
And like we know, with the story is that they were told to be back by Christmas. So it was only a short period of time, as probably to make a career for themselves, but that ended tragically wrong.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of young men joined up because there was nothing here. They wanted a career, they wanted a salary, they wanted a uniform. And a lot of the young men as well lied about their age, and they were actually a lot younger just to get into the army. Because it was a job.
Have you been to the Somme yourself? Did you?
No, I haven't. I was supposed to travel out on the Mazines trip last year, but I didn't get travelling, so someday. Now that I know a little bit more about it.
How long did it take to write? Did you have to write everything down yourself?
It's taken about 9 months for my end of it, and then we've launched it today, so it's good to see all that come into fruition.
And it's come to this now, and it's going to be a massive success because it's going to go all around the country now, and other groups around the country will take over from there.
And around the world, actually, because a lot of the embassies were represented today.
We'll be broadcast on the internet, so it'll be watched by millions of people will watch this. And tell them yourself, just don't hesitate to get in contact with whoever is doing the history. If you have any...
Well, if anybody wants more information on the Roll of Honour or wants copies of the Roll of Honour, they can contact the council here in Cavan and ask for the Community and Enterprise Department, and they'll be happy to help.
Angie, it's been a real pleasure talking to you. We're going to get Angie back on. I know she's under pressure today and she promised us this interview, so we're going to get her back on Cavan TV again. But in the meantime, congratulations and well done. I'm joined now by Andrew and Roy Kells. Is that right, lads? Right. And they're from Lisnaskea, but with the history of this soldier here, who was he born in Clonus? No, born in Red Hills.
Red Hills.
Red Hills, a Cavan man, and he's honoured in the book, obviously, the Roll of Honour book. Now, Andrew, I'll ask you first about John Joseph Kells. Who was this man? This is all original stuff, and how did you come by it?
Well, my grandfather's brother, who went off 1914 and needless to say never came back, and this is his death penny on his medals, and this is a postcard that he sent home when he was and he went off. He joined up. My grandfather actually went to meet him in going off in the train and got out of work, and the train was pulling away, and he never seen him.
Never seen him?
No.
Poignant, yeah, very poignant. The medals, do you know any history about the medals here?
All I know is they're World War I medals. There's
that's King George V in the middle there. I'm not sure, but
their names have left my head actually just at the moment.
Yeah, and this one here, 1914-15, and this looks like some sort of angel on this one. But this is more commemoration to John Joseph Kells, Lance Corporal no less. And Roy, you tell us a bit about this now.
Well, my uncle worked at Kirkpatrick's of Clonus and then joined up in 1915 actually, and he signed up in Clonus and went off to the war and was killed in the battlefield, blown up by a bomb, we're told, on the 1st of July 1916.
Fascinating stuff. Now, Mick, I don't know if you can get that there. Can you get that nice and clear now? We look at this scroll here, and it's obviously from the regiment, is it?
That's correct, yes.
And it's a commemoration to John Joseph Kells.
These are photographs of his grave at Martinstart in France.
In France?
France,
near Thiepval.
And we were saying they were fascinating because they're red sandstone,
and we're told there's only one of two cemeteries that have these, and we're told that this was because it was like a trial run and they weren't happy with it at the time, so then they went on to the white headstones after this.
Amazing. And he's identified on it as well, and his number and everything else is on it. And this photograph here, this is this picture, is it?
That's correct.
And here he looks such a young boy.
He was 20 when he was killed. 20 when he was killed, yeah.
Well, if you look at a young fella now, 20, and think of the horrors he was going off to face. And there's a story about his brother as well.
His brother joined up and went to America, but he survived, and when he died, he sent his orange sashes back, and we still have them in Lisnaskea.
You have the orange sashes. Belong to this man's brother.
That's correct, yes.
And just finally, this is the Orange Order, the tie here. We were admiring this earlier to commemorate the Somme.
That's correct. The Orange Order brought out to commemorate those who fell at the Somme, and I suppose in particular the 36th Ulster Division. It came out, I think, for the 75th anniversary of the Battle of the Somme.
Well, lads, thanks for joining us, and thanks for bringing these fantastic... Can you get them clear, Mick? Just this certificate, I just have to ask you about this before we leave you. It says, John Kells of Clonus entered on active service to defend the liberty of his country, 20th of September 1914. These are the originals.
Yes.
And I think you talked to Savina earlier. Will they be on display in Cavan, or are you holding...
The museum has asked us would we would lend it to the museum when we brought them down today, so I think we probably will. It's just, they've been in the family obviously since for nearly 100 years now, so we'd like to show them on display.
Yeah, they should be...
The Kells family left Nedia Red Hills in 1946 and moved down to 5 Mile Town in County Tyrone, where I have 4 or 5 cousins living down in that area who originated from Red Hills.
You're a Cavan man at heart. You have Cavan blood in you.
Yes, absolutely.
Ladies and gentlemen, many thanks to the lads there, Andrew and Roy Kells, for sharing their artefacts with us. Thanks very much, lads.
Thank you.